After some rumors, now war has started and negative numbers for corn, soybeans, and wheat. And the one who is going to comment that is Jerry Gidel, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. If you are new here, please make sure to subscribe. So Jerry, after a few weeks of rumors, the war has started, and the Russian troops are already in Kiev, the Ukraine's capital. And contrary to what many people think, we got very negative numbers for all major agricultural commodities this Friday.
Well, it's been quite a emotional week here, to say the least. Things got it picking up here after our President's holiday, and on Tuesday things were up. Wednesday really kind of got going, but nobody really sensed that that was going to be that crazy after the close. But President Putin decided to rally his populace there and create plenty of false flags over the last couple of weeks. And he then said he had to end up protecting the Russians that were being abused in Ukraine. So then we had quite an emotional reaction there on Thursday. Of course, that's not surprising. Wheat and corn, particularly, are two crops that Ukraine has been a significant player in the world's export markets. And that, so in that case, they were up. Beans were also up pretty sharply from the standpoint that technically, once they got above the 1650 zone, it made a move up, clear up above $17, and that type of thing. Interestingly enough, though, the weather forecast in South America still had some moisture for Argentina. They've had a couple of showers both on Thursday and Friday here. There's still the expectations, though, this weekend and next week rains are going to come in there and kind of stabilize things in Argentina. And so it was a vulnerable one. It actually slipped and went lower on Thursday, and that markets then were still firm on Thursday night, but things really turned into a kind of a super liquidation situation there on Friday with, I guess it started on early morning, late night, whichever you like to say, when the Russians offered to have a pause here and see if there's any negotiations. The Ukrainian government that still supposedly is in Kiev, and that didn't respond to that. So things that and also this the USDA's numbers that were released on Thursday, which kind of got overshadowed by everything that was going on there in Eastern Europe and around the Black Sea, and that ultimately we got into quite a liquidation situation today once we started to slip below yesterday's highs, below a couple days ago's highs, I should say. And so the markets slipped back. Both the corn and wheat haven't really taken out some of the big psychologies of 650 and 850 in the spot March values, but beans definitely was surprising. They closed below the $16 mark in tonight's close, so that's a little shaky out there on this the technical action that we've had.
And let's go right on to these numbers brought up by the USDA. So, what did you think of the surface numbers and also the volume that they released?
Well, the USDA's numbers, my kind of personal response to them is that they kind of punted. I realized that things have been a little up in the air. We had this whole issue of even back a couple of weeks ago that the Black Sea situation was percolating out there. But versus their numbers that they put together back last November, um, and also just the reactions we've had in, or the excuse me, the weather we've had in the and changes in South America's production numbers down there. I was a little surprised that they really didn't change much on things. They actually left corn's planting numbers and its yield number at 181. The change from last fall. They adjusted some things in the corn numbers where they increased ethanol, but they decreased exports, which doesn't really ring true here at this point with the issues we've had in Paraná and Rio Grande, and even dinged up some of the prospects there in Argentina. And that now the big situation in Brazil, of course, is going to be what size crop we get out of Grosso. And that, interestingly enough, there's some weather forecasters that are getting a little concerned. Surprisingly, while we're going to have better weather in Argentina here in the next week to 10 days, it's going to help finish up the harvesting of beans and getting the planting of corn in the north where it's dry. Some are concerned that we might be coming back with another dry spell in late April and May, which would not be the right thing for that crop. But, you know, weather forecasts sometimes cannot tell you the true story 6 to 8 weeks from now. But the other, of course, numbers at this point is going to be the soybeans. They did increase the number slightly from last fall, but only up to 88 million. So between the two here, we're at this kind of classic 180 million number. And there's been a lot of people anticipating that total number of corn and soybeans to be closer to 182. It's a real interesting situation. You start looking at the total available crops and acres out there. At this point, we were around 200 and 53 million for the 8 major crops. And I'm anticipating we will get closer to 255 this time around, primarily because some of the fringe areas out there, there's some very good prices for crops like cotton. Actually, the cotton number that came out in this number was 12,700,000, which is 700,000 even higher than what we came up with from the national cotton growers. And to some extent, the Northern Plains is going to need some more wheat that they lost from last year. And I think canola is going to be a strong one there too. Sorghum's maybe going to be a down, but overall, the total number of acres that are out there is getting kind of tight. Just to go back to the soybeans, though, on this S&D number they came up with, interesting. They really didn't make a lot of adjustments in their demand numbers, and they came up with a stocks number right around 300 million. So if the export number, which was reduced a little bit here in their demand numbers, turns out to be a little stronger because of the problems we've had in South America, and that the soybeans still have interestingly enough, better fundamental numbers from the government's thing than actually the wheat number was going to be up 120 million. Corn was going to still be at 1.9 billion carryover stock, and the soybeans are the one that kind of had the worst close here today, which is kind of surprising.
Yes, there is a very concerning situation for the buyers in the market, I guess, because for the case of soybeans, for instance, in Brazil alone, there will be an output that is 5 million metric tons smaller, and they will have reductions in Argentina, in Paraguay, to many exporters.
Right. I think that our friends from Sassafras Mercado put that number you just mentioned out there this afternoon, and that's that's an interesting. That's just from Brazil, and you throw in Paraguay and Argentina that having factors on that. That to me, that's one of those. As I said, I think in some cases the USDA decided that things are still up in the air here, and so we won't change much on this thing. Instead of what really what's happened so far, at least I got to feel like that there's going to be less supplies out there now. Maybe that's going to we've got some room in an oak crop here to take a few bushels out, and I think we will. Excuse me. Uh, uh, Take our oak crop carryover down, but at the same time, we're going to need a very good, strong U.S. Growing season here to get to some of these yield numbers. Wheat's another one here where they've got a really strong yield number out there with problems in the Southern Plains. And even at this point, Canada and some areas of Montana are still very, very dry. So, right now, though, it's still another real month before we get the USDA's survey of producers out there and what they decide to do. And that's really been a very interesting situation. There was even some commentary from the USDA's chief economist that's saying that the issues here on fertilizer costs and things of that nature could make some different factors in here. I've been a little bit on the high side of expectations for corn. I kind of grew up in the Midwest here where corn is kind of king. If they can feel like they can get a pretty strong yield, they'll still go ahead and put the things together. It's in the areas outside of the Lincoln to Columbus zone in there that where the things are going to be a little less less enthusiastic for corn. And I think there will be more beans, but I'm not sure we're going to be at 90 million, which might be what we need to be planted for the coming year.
Yes, and getting back to the war, what do you think the market watchers will be observing? Will be still observing the war over the next couple of weeks?
Well, there's a lot of different opinions. Some other people kind of threw in the idea, well, we didn't end up putting the sanctions on uh, their exports. I'm not sure how you can sanction the exports. You can Russia's not going to send us any grain, and they're not really going to send a lot of grain to Europe. So we couldn't. Europe and us both have stuff to sell, and so the reality saying we're not going to end up buying grains for them, that doesn't really matter. And you can't really tell North Africa and other areas of the world, well, you should go along with us and sanction their exports. But I think the one thing, a couple things that could happen here that could make things interesting, because of the sanctions that were announced, some of the banks that are involved in the export trade, and you need your credit, a line of credit, and for your bills of lading and things of that nature, people aren't stepping right up there and going ahead and providing that type of financing. And also, Lloyd's of London and the insurance people aren't too excited about insuring boats to go into these various ports in the Black Sea. Now, so far, there hasn't been any significant kind of action in the Black Sea port areas. It's primarily been going towards the capital. But that's an interesting situation. And I think it's going to be quite interesting as we go forward here. I think there could still be, and I've seen India talking about looking to different places to buy things because of things happening. And the reality of it is too, is that the total number of bushels coming out of the Black Sea, corn, soybeans, sunflower and sunflower products, things like that, is now potentially going to be controlled by one country, not two. And I think that's going to make a difference on how many bushels and what type of agricultural products come out. Now, the one thing is it popped up in here, and it's kind of surprising that our Western traders here, the Bungys, the Cargills, the Dreyfuses, uh, have operations over there in processing or in transportation of exports and things of that nature, and big you know, companies like Mondelez, which makes Oreo cookies that people know in this country, ends up that they've got operations there. So they were in Ukraine. They had some operations in Russia, but I wonder how much of this thing's going to change. Some even commentary today talking about McDonald's and what they might or might not do. This is going to be an interesting situation. This is not the way the world wants people to treat their neighbors, and so. The financial factors in here are very, I think, significant. But the biggest problem is that it doesn't help the Ukrainians in the short term here, and that's what's quite disappointing in this whole thing. Send a few missiles that might bounce around Moscow at the same time these guys are in Ukraine might make a difference in Putin's attitude. But that's. I'm not going to be able to settle that situation, but there's lots of frustrations here in the trading world. There's always a lot of attitudes of you always want to punch bullies in the nose.
Yes, we could be discussing with a week like that for hours and hours. Thank you so much,
Exactly.
Jerry.
Exactly. One last thing before we get away. Monday, we do end up having first notice day in March. Nobody's really kind of paying attention to it, but it looks like corn, soybeans, meal are not going to have any deliveries, primarily because of the fact that we had such an emotional week this week. Nobody wanted to deliver anything. Now, I don't think they also want to deliver it after the big break here. There is some possibilities of wheat. Wheat is the one that in the U.S. here, at least at this point, I'd sure love to see some of these people that don't want to buy Black Sea wheat to show up in the U.S. We could definitely use them to kind of counter this kind of slow leaking export demand we have right now. But the dollar is really strong, so everybody keeps saying, "Oh no, I can't pay U.S. prices with the dollar." But maybe that'll change. But one thing that we talked about last week of taking advantage of the rally up there around $17 on beans and up around $7 on corn and making some marketing decisions. It didn't look so good yesterday, but it looks a hell of a lot better today.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jerry.
You have a good day, sir. We'll talk next week.